But that never happened to Sam Spade.
No, that never happened to Sam Spade. That doesn't happen in the books because, of course, it would slow down the narrative to have the PI go to the police station and say, "Hi, I'm checking in. I'm going to be doing surveillance." That's all stuff that just, when you're writing the fiction, the needs of the fiction, the story, outweigh any need for authenticity. And I think when people say they like authentic crime fiction, what they mean is plausible, not really authentic, because authentic crime fiction would be kind of boring. There'd be a lot of time of the PI sitting in the car staring, nothing happens, coming back the next night, sitting staring again, nothing happens, coming back the next night, and this can go on for weeks,
So this real life experience you were getting was nothing like the crime fiction that made you want to write?
No, there were things that happened occasionally that were exciting, but they were just like most jobs, right? They have their exciting moments, but there are long stretches of routine. And that's what most of the job is, punctuated by moments of sheer terror or excitement. But yeah, it's very different. There are some ways in which it's similar. The fact that information is the coin of the realm, and that nobody gives it away for free. In the better crime fiction you see, the better PI stories, the PI doesn't go up to the cop and say, "Hey, what do you know about such and such case?" The cop says, "Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you all about it." In real life, they have information. You need information. You have to be willing to trade something to get it. Information is power, and it's all about who has the information. And you don't give it away without getting something of value back in return.
But this is, it's interesting that Dashiell Hammett himself was, like you, a PI prior to writing. So you would think that somehow the realism, the real life experience that he had would translate into his work, which would then translate again into real life. But
yeah, some of it did. There are some things that he did that were very realistic, some of which I'll talk about when I introduce the film. But he was a writer, and he knew that the needs of telling a good story come first. And I think that there is an interesting, you're talking about how his experience affected the way he wrote, and then of course he was hugely influential on everybody who came after him, and of course then John Huston made the film of the book, which became so famous, and then the film then goes on to influence writers of future books, and so the films and the books start to influence each other. And by the time you get down to my generation, we're influenced by film as much as we are by the books that came before us in the tradition.
Well, you're going off script now, but this is one of my main interests in narrative, is that writers no longer, current writers no longer learn their narrative structure now from books, but from TV or movies, because that's where they're learning how to put a story together, what comes first, what comes last. And the way that these narratives cross over from film to book, just like you said, with if we use Hammett as an example, he wrote the film, or the Maltese Falcon, which was made into a movie, which influenced James Ellroy, who wrote L.A. Confidential, which was made into a movie. And now 15 years later, L.A. Confidential is considered a high point in sort of the genre.
Yes.
And it is now influencing more writers.
Yes, and I would say that the film L.A. Confidential has influenced a lot more writers than the book has.
Yeah. There's probably a larger audience for that than actually sat down and read that 500 pages or whatever it was.
Yeah, a great book, by the way.
Yeah.
Worth reading. But
was there any other influences beyond PI or film noir that made you want to write?
Oh yeah, when I first started writing, I think I wrote like a very bad imitation of Kurt Vonnegut. I love Kurt Vonnegut, and I kind of mimicked his voice for a while. When you start writing, it takes a while to find your voice, and I'm a big fan of jazz, and Sonny Rollins is my favorite tenor guy, and in his first couple of albums, you can hear early Dexter Gordon in him, you can hear Lester Young in him, you can hear how he was using Charlie Parker's Attack, but translating it from alto to tenor. But by maybe his fourth album, he doesn't sound like anybody else. He sounds like him, and he's developed his voice. And it takes time to develop a voice. And I wrote a very poor imitation of Kurt Vonnegut for a while, and was angry at myself for writing a poor imitation. And then I wrote a very bad version of Hunter S. Thompson for a while, and then got angry with myself about that. But you just have to accept that that's part of the process of finding your own voice.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring up finding your own voice, because the more that I learn about you, the more I realize how much of you is in these books. When you bring up Comiskey Park and fond memories of that, right, or other things about Chicago, the landmarks. As a matter of fact, I believe the bar you were describing in the piece that I read is an actual bar, and it's the bar where you're sitting in the picture on the flyer that we have. With
yes,
the people,
that is. It's the Old Town Ale House. The author photo was taken in that bar, and everything that I described hanging behind the bar is there. They have Maltese Falcon sitting there. They've got the whole thing. And yeah, I love to use real places. In my books, if Ray Dudgeon is eating in a restaurant, unless he gets food poisoning, it's a real restaurant. I'll change the name if he gets food poisoning. But if he likes the place, like when he wants soul food, he goes to Pearl's Place on the South Side, and Pearl's Place is great. I recommend it to anybody who's in Chicago. I love to give little shout outs to places that I like. It's just a fun way, and it keeps it real for me.